folks have trouble really truly being able to let go of control of some of the things that they need to be able to let go of. So some of that has to do with delegation and your skill set in teaching other people, but a lot of it has to do with developing a sense of comfort and confidence with creating space for other people to take something you worked so hard on.
What's up, Print Hustlers? It's Steven from Campus Inc. Today we have a very special episode with Sarah Silverman, Ph.D., and spoke at Print Hustlers. Talks about change management, leadership development, delegation. We're going to really dive into it today, and this is going to be a good one, especially if you're talking about working with virtual assistants and working on delegating tasks. Sarah's going to go through some of the myths, some of the errors, some of the things that small business owners make when trying to manage a team. But this podcast would not be possible without our amazing sponsors. And so, we'll start it off. So Graphic Source, if you need a solution to improve efficiency and reduce costs in your art department, you can hit up Graphic Source. Graphic Source offers industry-leading outsource options for truly becoming a part of your team. They plug and play with Printavo and other shop management softwares. And if it comes to SEPs, mockups, creative art, order management, embroidery, digitizing, back office admin, there's no better company in our industry to work with. They have over 40 years in the game and a proven track record of success. Hit them up and you'll get 50% off your first vector, SEP, or embroidery order. Thanks so much, Graphic Source. All right, EasyWay. Spending hours cleaning screens is a thing of the past. With EasyWay's screen printing and screen cleaning chemicals, their innovative formulas are designed to work quickly and effectively so you can spend less time cleaning and more time creating. Plus, EasyWay is passionate about empowering printers of all skill levels. They offer helpful resources and expert advice to help you succeed in screen printing. Thank you so much, EasyWay, for sponsoring the podcast. And if you haven't heard of multicraft_daddy, go to Instagram right now, type in multicraft_daddy. And if you need ink supplies or a daddy, Multicraft screen printing and digital supplies for over 50 years has been providing you with top brands at competitive prices. You can mention the Printavo podcast and receive an extra 10% off your first order. Dave at Multicraft wants to sweeten it up. And so every episode you can DM him and he is giving away PMI tape. So if you haven't already DM'd him, shoot him a message. He picks a winner every single week. And we appreciate you. All right. DGI Apparel. I'm here to tell you about the best new software platform to hit the industry. It's called DGI Apparel. And it was built by a group of super smart MIT engineers with a background in screen printing. It allows you to connect your accounts with Sanmar, Alphabroder, SNS, AS Color. You can even buy PMI tape on there. And you can compare prices, inventory, shipping times, across every apparel supplier on one website. You don't need multiple screens. You can literally just go to dgiapparel.com and all of them will pop up. The average shop spends 2 hours purchasing every day, and DGI is going to cut that time in half. So ask yourself, what would you do with an extra hour every single day? And we don't have a promo code because DGI is free, and it's always going to be free. That's right. It costs you $0. So if you're not already using DGI, you're wasting your time and money. Sign up today at dgiapparel.com. Join 1,500 other shops that are saving time and money on their purchases. All right, BMAC. BMAC is one of the best dryers in the DTF space. They are a leader in innovative solutions for DTF printing. They manufacture these printers here in the United States. They're dedicated to providing top-of-the-line equipment and technology that enhance productivity and quality with a commitment to excellence. BMAC Industries continues to push boundaries of what's possible in garment decoration. I work super closely with DTF Superstore and the team over there, and this dryer is great. We just got ours just a couple of months ago, and they are fantastic. So hit up DTF Superstore for all of your DTF needs, and let's get to the podcast. All right, Print Hustlers, we are back for another episode of the Print Hustlers podcast. Today, it's just me and our guest, Sarah. Bruce is heading back to LA, making sure the house is safe and everything like that. But Sarah, it's so good to have you. I saw you at Print Hustlers Speak. Welcome again. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. It's a huge pleasure.
So for listeners that weren't at Print Hustlers, Sarah gave an incredible talk that we're going to dive into a little bit today. And the way Sarah found out about our industry is really, really interesting. So Sarah, if you want to quickly give us just a little bit of background on yourself and how you got here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have the great benefit of getting to work with folks across a broad variety of industries and work with leaders of all kinds that impress me in so many different ways. But I came across Print Hustlers and the team behind it actually by meeting Ryan Moore, who I'm sure many listeners will know well, at of all things, a seal fit crucible in Southern California back in September. And Ryan and I were two of six folks who showed up to do a 24-hour physical mental endurance challenge in Temecula, California, and we had a crazy time, and we had a time I think that demonstrated to both of us where some of our maybe our strengths are, but also where some of our sort of mental and physical limitations are. Oh, I was just going to say, experiences like that, I think, bring you really close to one another and give you a chance to see where people's real character and integrity are. And I was so excited to meet and spend some time with Ryan. So I was thrilled to be invited to come and participate in the conference.
So it's no surprise, if you know Ryan Moore, that he would pay to do a 24-hour, essentially like Navy SEAL training. David Goggins living like the whole thing. Super inspiring that you all did that. Before we dive into it, what made you want to do that?
Yeah, I as a young person, I participated in sports and athletic endeavors and considered myself to be kind of an athlete. And as I've gotten older, I've continued to try to find the kind of frontiers of my own ability. I think that putting yourself in situations where you can really learn something new about yourself it can get a little bit harder and harder as you try lots of different things. And I came across the Seal Fit Crucibles actually by way of suggestion from the coach at my CrossFit gym, who saw me participating and thought, "Well, this person really enjoys pain." But it turns out in many ways to be a perfect fit, because to prepare for these things, it's not just a physical endurance challenges. There are many obstacle racing and that sort of thing, and those are awesome. But this type of challenge in particular really requires mental toughness and kind of building the capacity to do a couple of key things. One is really recognize and manage your own kind of emotional experience so that you can show up and perform. And another is to really exercise the capacity to focus on and support others, no matter how much pain you're in. And that's my style. So, and it sounds like in a lot of ways that's Ryan's style too.
We'll give Ryan will definitely listen to us. You get 20 seconds to give Ryan some shit or make fun of him. What was the most fun part or one funny memory from spending 24 hours with Ryan? We all have great memories. Most of the time our memories are Ryan playing a guitar and singing fun songs. So what memories do you have that you would want to share with everyone?
Ryan was the only person who showed up to the Seal Fit Crucible with green hair. Which I think he had left over from like a Barbie party, where he had dressed up like Ken. And secondly, he's the only person. So we had to go through these ice baths. It's like between 45 and 50 degrees outside, and we had to dive in these ice baths that were chock full of ice. And we're all going through, like, just trying to get through. And Ryan comes up and he somersaults directly into the first one, and he splashes all the ice out, and it was hilarious, and unfortunately got enough attention that the SEAL Fit instructors asked him to go back and do it again and demonstrate for everybody. So he got his just desserts there, but good on him.
Yes. Ryan loves ice baths. And if you don't follow him on Instagram, you can follow his ice bath journey. He sometimes brings the tubs to trade shows. More on that later. So Sarah, diving into the talk you gave at Print Hustlers was, all about like delegation and maybe the myths of teaching and managing. And what's really interesting is in our industry, lots of shops are learning to work with virtual assistants. They're learning to work with people not right next to them. And we actually we put out a podcast a couple weeks ago about working with VAs or offshore associates. And the amount of interest we got on how to do it, what could go wrong, all of these different things. I think this conversation today is so timely because as we turn a page on a new year, shops and business owners are really trying to think like, okay, how do I become a better leader, a better manager? How do I work? How do I make my business more elastic? And I guess what's really interesting is you have like small business mentality, big business mentality, and a lot of these small business owners, they're 5 to 10 employees, could be husband and wife. They haven't gotten trained in delegation management. Where do you think the biggest shortfalls are when small business owners try to lead? Like, where do you think, maybe talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, as you know, a lot of different profiles decide to start a company. Some people feel very entrepreneurial and they have kind of big visions. They want to build something big. Some people really just have a passion. They want to build something that aligns their passion with what they're spending their time with on a regular basis. And then some people kind of fall in between those two. Maybe they really enjoy the work, but what they actually want is a sustainable, profitable business that allows them to live the life they want to live. And so those three different profiles matter from the standpoint that the skill sets you maybe naturally have and the skill sets you want to develop need to kind of flow from that. So if you've got a good sense of what it is you really want to accomplish with your business, that's kind of step one. And if you're not sure, you're sort of standing on I sort of want a lifestyle business. I want to be able to go to Florida for 3 months a year or whatever. But then I also want to have this sort of big business with multiple locations, et cetera. Starting by stepping back and taking a second to think about what really, really is critical to you will, like most things, start to make clear the kinds of skill sets that you really need to develop. So if delegation is one of those, which I kind of argue, as you know, is essential for any business leader, right? Like anyone who's starting a business will start typically with a tremendous amount of enthusiasm and some amazing amount of energy that seems like it's never going away, but certainly will peter out after some period of time.
No, I was going to say, you've like studied this, like you have your Ph.D. Like tell us a little bit about that. Cause I think you're bringing this from a very almost like scientific background, but like there's a lot of really high level points you bring. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've done in the past, like your studies and some of the stuff?
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of this aligns with sort of natural human behavior. So a lot of people will recognize probably themselves in this, right? We all get excited about new things. So it's January right now. So it's a perfect time to talk about this. We get excited about new things. We set new goals. We have ideas about what we're going to be like in the future. And we start to try to dig into the work. And then we find that what we thought and what we're actually doing start to sort of deviate from one another, right? Everything sort of proceeds from that. Same deal when you're starting a company. You might get through January. Hopefully you do. You get a little bit further down the road, but you still start to find that there are these points of friction between what you're envisioning, what you expected to happen, and what's actually happening in your experience. And that plays out in not just in sort of running a business, but that plays out. And I see this in virtually every corner of the work that I do. I do a ton of direct executive coaching and working with leadership teams, and just finding that space between what people hold in their minds as expectations and the reality is often the sort of first unlock to really making progress.
And I feel like small business owners, you said, we start out with a ton of enthusiasm. I'm starting this business, or I'm going to be in the weeds, I'm doing it, and it grows and it sort of balloons. And then it hits this certain point where it starts to feel a little out of control, like the cray-cray feeling. And I feel like that's where kind of the small businesses start to hit this ceiling of like, I can't grow because I can't delegate, or I don't know how to lead, or the skills that I need to learn aren't there, right? At what is it an employee headcount number where you start to see that? Like, where do you start to see the chaos start to happen in a small business?
That can vary. I find that for folks that are essentially bootstrapping, that are building a business essentially from scratch without really taking on any outside capital, that can happen at around 5 to 7 employees, typically at 10 to 15 employees. For folks that have taken on outside capital, they've got a pretty good cushion of support. Usually things start to really break at about 20 to 25 employees. Some people will feel that even they have 4 employees and everything is still not quite clicking because they haven't figured out, do I add capacity first or do I add volume first? And that finding that balance is always a challenge. And that doesn't go away. That just sort of gets a little bit more tenable as you have more volume to sustain the sort of variation in human capital.
And so when shops start to, or when small businesses start to hit that feeling, is it that they're not capable of it? Like they're no longer qualified to lead. They don't know how to lead. Like what are the mistakes that you see the founders making? Like if you were to look at a bunch of these small print shops all across the United States, and their founder is in there every single day and they're grinding, they're working 60 hours a week. They're doing everything. They're putting out fires, right? They're probably hurting their work-life balance. What is the glaring theme across all of them that you really start to see, just from an observation standpoint?
Folks have trouble really truly being able to let go of control of some of the things that they need to be able to let go of. So some of that has to do with delegation and your skill set in teaching other people to do the work. But a lot of it has to do with developing a sense of comfort and confidence with creating space for other people to take something you worked so hard on. Consider it like the most valuable thing in your possession, almost like a child, right? And you're essentially handing that to someone else and trusting that they're going to take that and do as you would do with it. And that's a lot more of a mindset and a comfort with your own ability to let go often than it is with actually the capacity of other people. It's not the capacity of other people, but it's a kind of balance between those two things.
So you said that like that capacity of other people. When I talk to a lot of shops, and I run a company as well, I'll talk to shops and say like, why can't someone else do it? And they'll say they're not capable. They can't do it. There's no way. If I don't do it, they'll mess it up. Or like if I'm not there, it won't go right. Is what you're saying that's more of a mental hurdle for the founder than the actual employees more often than not? Is that what you're kind of saying?
That's right. Yeah. I know that's not going to be a well-received message.
That's okay. That's right? Why you're here. That's why you're here.
It's always harder to work on yourself than it is to work on others. And I'm not suggesting that it's exclusively that, but what's the rub? Why can't the other person do it? Right. And often people in my conversations, people will follow that by saying, I tried to give them the space to do it. And here's what happened. They never did it. They did it and it was screwed up. They did it and it was screwed up and they didn't even notice that it was screwed up. See, they can't do it. Right. That's all evidence that we're looking for examples of their inability as opposed to looking for examples of their ability and building on.
Huh. Looking for looking for opportunities of ability instead of highlighting what they're not able. That's super powerful. Okay, let's talk about those why that might fail. One of the things you talked about during your talk at Print Hustlers was trust in both directions, right? So the founder has to trust their staff. The staff has to trust their leader. And there are a lot of blind spots in that. Can you develop that point a little bit further and talk about where, like how employees, like what you see commonly and, how to maybe start to change that a little bit, like how to get employees trust? Because I think that's an interesting thing, is it's a two-way street.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you pulled that thread out. And we talk about trust as being a combination of factors, as you said, that are partly as a leader about trusting yourself in your own capacity to stand where you need to stand, not in the fray. But part of it is also about recognizing in your employees competence, reliability, and motive. And often, actually, we build trust in the opposite direction. First, we build trust in people's motive by getting to know them. We assess whether we think that they're motivated by the right intentions. Are they motivated, for example, to do a good job, or are they just here for a paycheck? Right. And if we get to the point where we can assess someone as being motivated by what we consider to be aligned ideals, then we start looking for, are they reliable? Do they do the things that they say they're going to do? And if they do those things, then we start feeling confident in investing in their competence. Like, we recognize that they may not have all the competence they need now, but they can build that competence over time. And then we've gotten true trust in their capacity if we believe in their competence, reliability, and motive. And then the same is true of them for us, right? Do we as leaders do what we say we're going to do? Are we as leaders motivated by building a positive team culture and doing the right thing for clients? Or are we just in it for a profit, right? And are we able to do the work in a way that makes sense, that creates efficiency, that creates positive work conditions for people? That combination of factors are often the places where something is breaking down. If I'm a leader and I say one thing and I do another, if I'm an employee and I'm not reliable in the way that I operate or in the outcomes that I deliver, those are the things that start denigrating trust and get to the point where that can get all the way to the point where I know that there's something going on that I just don't trust you, but I'm not sure why. Right? Something is usually coming up with those.
So a lot of times I'll talk to shops and they'll say like, employees these days, they just don't want to work. Why can't they just show up and do a good job, right? Like, why have times changed? Do we need bouncy balls and free yoga and, unlimited PTO? Like, what is this work culture, right? And times have definitely changed a little bit. But what do you say to that when a business owner will start to kind of play that scapegoat as just no one wants to work anymore?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that if we sort of like rewind each generation, there's some version of that story. No one knows how to work hard. No one knows how to think critically. No one knows how to fill in the blank thing that we're now sort of blaming for this. And I think that it is true that workplace conditions have changed, and we'd like to say that the value proposition, the sort of social contract of work, has changed. It used to be really cut and dry. The value proposition is I give you money and you give me labor. It's a more complex dynamic than that now, right? For a lot of reasons, because we've tied a lot of things to work. We've tied, in some cases, like health insurance, and we've tied fitness memberships and other incentives and ways of trying to navigate the best possible tax consequences. And so in a lot of ways, people are just responding to the incentive structure around them. And I think people think they've got to offer a lot of fancy things, but the reality is it's actually a fairly small subset of very large organizations that offer a lot of fancy things. The things that keep people really engaged and motivated at work are the opportunity to work with other people that they trust and enjoy spending time with. And so if people show up and they don't really want to work, then we have to do some work to figure out, if it seems that they don't want to work, we have to do some work to figure out why they're showing up. Why are you here? What is it actually that inspires and motivates you? And it's not that we have to bend over backwards to inspire and motivate people necessarily, but to understand them. Just the act of understanding them and demonstrating that we care enough to do so will help typically keep people more engaged. And so what do people often need? They need something that feels like it's a little bit of a stretch, a challenge for them. They need something that feels like it's demonstrating some respect for their contribution, even if they're doing relatively menial work. And so I would challenge people who say they just don't want to work or they have employees who just don't want to work to take that little extra step and see if they can't kind of unlock what's going on with this specific employee or employees that they're referring to.
And so if we were to compare, a lot of people that are printing shirts, it's an hourly job. It's sometimes pretty hard labor. You're on your feet. And I make the comparison to, someone that could work at Starbucks, Jimmy John's, Chipotle, Home Depot. What are things that those companies that you see that big companies do that make that balance and that make those employees feel like purposeful and enjoy being there? Are there things that you've seen organizations do, like specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I have seen folks. So larger organizations, I think, are one thing because they're positioned to do things a little bit differently. Larger organizations can take a public stance in ways that smaller organizations could, but it doesn't necessarily make quite the impact. But nevertheless, the kind of theme is I can demonstrate that I have some commitment to my community, right? Whether your community is global or your community is this one block in this one town, demonstrating that there's some kind of social relationship between your company or organization and the community in which it lives creates this kind of sense of responsibility among the employees that often affects how everyone shows up to work. So that's one thing to consider. How you established a kind of relationship with your community and created this sense that even if you're an hourly employee who may be sort of like behind the scenes pressing shirts, that you are an ambassador, that you are a representative of this relationship with the community. The second thing is the team culture matters a ton, and the team culture really comes out of how individuals interact with one another. And so as a person who's a leader in the organization, wherever you're sitting, whether you're the founder, you're the manager, you're the person who's sort of the right hand, showing up and spending time, even if it's not a lot of time, spending time with people, again, showing that you are interested in understanding what motivates them. You may not be able to take action on it. And that's really key. I'm not suggesting you've got to show up and you're like, oh, you like Snickers bars, I'm bringing you a Snickers bar every week or whatever. Right. But just demonstrating that interest and showing that every individual who's a part of the team matters makes a big difference as well. And then that kind of last piece is people in general need to feel challenged. There's like right now it's really popular, I think, in kind of general culture to like question whether we actually are like enjoy the things that we think we enjoy. We started chatting about this notion of a steel fit crucible. Why would you go do something that's really uncomfortable and then like pay for it? Why would you do that to yourself? And one reason for that is that we humans really build our sense of self-esteem based on the extent to which we're able to show up relative to our ideal self. Like when we can show up and demonstrate really how strong we are, how much fortitude, how much resilience, we feel actually better about ourselves than if we spent our time sitting on the beach or watching TV or what have you. And so giving people a little bit of a challenge, and this takes some work for business leaders, right? To give someone a challenge, sometimes you have to create the space to fail. And sometimes if you're working 60 hours a week as a leader, you don't want to give someone else the space to fail because darn it, they should deliver too. But the payoff you get by creating that space is that you're creating capacity in your person, and you're also really engaging them at work in a way that they often don't get access to elsewhere.
I want to, one of the things you said is going around and just making sure everyone feels welcome, important. Something I see in some of the bigger shops. My business partner is twice my age. He doesn't really get to be in the business every day. And actually our facility is 2 hours south of where we live. So when we come into town, a lot of time is just walking around to every employee and just greeting them. How's your family doing? How's this doing? And Justin Lawrence does this Oklahoma shirt company. Like not every employee knows him, but he's going to go around and give him a pat on the back and ask him about something. And just like that 3 minutes, is so powerful. That is time well spent. But I think one thing that small business owners, they're wearing so many hats. They're the accountant, they're the delivery driver, they're customer service. And a lot of times human resources takes a back seat. It's usually like the last thing that they focus on. And, how much one-on-one time should every employee get in a company? Like, is there a little bit of a formula? Should every employee get a one-on-one? How would you structure something like that in a small 10 to 15 person organization?
Yeah. So, the general rule of thumb is that any person can reasonably manage 3 to 5 people. And so when you think about one-on-one, you should, in a 10 to 15 person company, you should be thinking about maybe a quarterly opportunity to chat, not for very many minutes necessarily, but like a quarterly opportunity to chat with the people at the very top, the 1 or 2 people at the very top of the organization. But they should be getting a lot more attention from the kind of next layer of people in the organization that are important enough. Maybe they're setting schedules, maybe they're doing other work in the company that has them kind of elevated in the hierarchy. But they're getting attention from peers or from superiors. At least on a weekly basis. And that's aside from the hopefully daily people are greeting each other and not just grunting as they walk through the hallways. But that's, I would really think about thinking, speaking of opportunities for delegation, I would really think about who are they spending time with? It who could be sort of their manager, their mentor, their sort of peer support person, so to speak, not support from a necessarily remediation point of view, but just a person who's there to kind of make sure they feel like they've got a social network at work. Those people should be in touch on a weekly basis at least, and making sure that they're in touch with how folks are doing.
So if you had a 15-person company, 1 founder, you really should have, 2 managers at least, right? That can meet one-on-one with every employee. And if you don't necessarily have a manager, is what you're saying like a captain, team captain? And that team captain should be responsible for, 4, 5, 6 people to be able to report back. There's no way that the founder can manage 15 people. It's just like, it does not work. And you're going to be spread too thin. And so during those meetings or during those one-on-ones, what should like an agenda, like how long should they be? What should an agenda look like? And it could be someone that's buying shirts, scheduling. It could be someone that's actually printing and doing physical labor. What, because I'll talk to shops and be like, I don't have time for a one-on-one. Like, we got shirts to print, right? What if you don't do one-on-ones and you're going to start doing them for the first time? What is an easy way to get started?
Yeah, sure. We use a really simple kind of formula, which is really just making space for a little bit of a status update on the personal side and a status update on the professional side. And what do I mean by that? It's not like, it doesn't have to be some sort of like massive revelation on the personal side, but sort of like, if you have kids, how are your kids doing? Right? Like, everybody healthy?
So what you're saying is during a one-on-one, it's not necessarily about work. It's just about good connection and trust. Okay. So you'll start with like personal stuff, like personal best, what's going on? How are the kids, family, just getting to know them.
Maybe you're a young person, you don't have a family, but you love surfing. Make that a priority to know, and ask like, have you gotten out lately? How's it going? And then on the professional side, anything going on that feels like has been a big win for the last week, anything that feels like it's an impediment or getting in your way of being successful. Is there anything you're feeling like you really want to be able to do that you can't? And those kind of really simple questions, just truly demonstrating an authentic interest in people, both on the personal side. And the personal side gives an opportunity to just check in. Sometimes folks are carrying a lot with them, and you're like, they just need a chance to say like, man, my mom's sick. And you can say, I'm really sorry to hear that. Just that's the time to say, I do want to talk to you a little bit more and offer support.
And I think it's not about, sometimes the business owner thinks they have to make everyone happy all the time, and they're responsible for everyone's well-being, and like they have to be the problem solver. I think what I've learned is sometimes just to be an ear, just to listen, right? And so a lot of times, like as business owners, we have this like hero complex. Like we want to make sure all of our employees are happy, and we want to make sure all of these things, and I just can't do it all. Why can't they all just be happy, right? What's the difference in getting, an employee to like you versus trust you? Do you think they're two different things? Like, does an employee necessarily have to love you and like you, but can still trust you?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great question. And I think that we all have, sort of back to basic psychology, we all have this desire to be liked. It's just sort of like socially adaptive. And I don't think that employees necessarily have to like you or feel a kinship or friendship with you. But I do think they can nevertheless trust you. And it's great if they like you. I actually think that's really good. If they find it appealing to be around you, and they enjoy your countenance, they enjoy the energy that you bring to the company. That's awesome, and that's something you can work to cultivate. But that's way less important than that they can trust that you know what you're doing. You're being honest and authentic. That you are doing what you say you're going to do. And that you're making choices that are navigating the company in the best possible direction. And so this becomes really obvious when we think about things like, what's the value proposition here? Well, companies have to turn a profit so that they can pay their employees. Right? You have to make revenue so you can pay your employees, and so that you can pay taxes, which is for the social good, right? And sometimes you have to make choices that are in the best interest of most people, but not in the best interest of all people. And being trustworthy sometimes means that you have to do that, and you have to be confident to say, I've made this choice, even though I recognize that it's not going to be in the best interest of all the people, so that it can be in the best interest of most people. And a trusting relationship would be one in which a person could feel pretty upset by that. Maybe they're being riffed. Maybe you've got to let them go. But they also nonetheless can trust and respect that you have actually made the right choice. They might not like you, at least for a while. They might not like the choice, but that's really good evidence that what you've cultivated is a true is a true kind of leadership mindset that they can get behind.
How do you test for trust? Is it feedback? Is there, like if 75 employees at Campus Inc., how many of them actually trust me? Right? Like something I think about. How many of them like me? Probably not all of them. Love them to death. But how do you test, and, from a self-awareness standpoint, are there things that you can do regularly? Like, yeah, how do you, because if you don't know if your employees trust you or not, like that's the baseline. How do you even get there to know where a starting point is?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the extent to which people trust you as a person matters a little bit more if they are closer to you in the kind of hierarchy of the organization, right? So, I think you can really assess whether people trust you in one-on-one or small group situations with them. So, if you've got a 75-person organization, you've probably got 5 to 7 people who are kind of at the helm of the organization. That's a kind of group that I work a lot with, because those are the places where people start to doubt each other's motives. Are you in it for you? Or are you in it for us? Right? Or, why is finance always telling me no? Or why is, this part of the organization not supporting what I want to do? And it becomes pretty clear pretty quickly in the interactions that you have with one another, whether you could sit down and make a choice together that doesn't appear to be in any one person's best interest, but is in the best interest of the organization. If alternatively you end up with a lot of fighting or a lot of turf protection, those are sort of points of evidence that you've lost trust. But one thing that we do is actually we push people to have honest conversations. One way to know if people trust you is to ask them.
Do you trust me? Yeah.
Right, yeah. Like, do you feel you can trust me to make this kind of choice? And I'll make one other comment. I know we want to move on, but for the rest of the organization, one of the questions in the Net Promoter Score is, I trust the leaders of this company to make the best choices, on behalf of the company. And that's a reasonable question to ask. Like, it's not so much, do you trust me personally at that point in the organization, but do you trust that I'm going to operate in the best interests of you in this company?
And by Net Promoter Score, you can send out surveys to your employees, right? You can send out surveys to your customers, and it's, being able to send out a survey to your employees. We do an anonymous survey to our employees, and it is so hard to read, but it is so helpful to really look in the mirror and be like, okay, this is how they feel, and that asking those questions. But even in a face-to-face, sometimes I'll ask the question like, okay, after today, do you feel like heard and understood? Do you feel like I understand you? Am I tracking? And if they say no, then we're not done, right? Then I haven't done my job. But even if you ask them like, hey, do you trust that this is going to work? You can kind of beat around the bush a little bit. And if they hesitate, I think that's the red flag, that it's like, my work here is not done. And you have to dig deeper instead of brushing it off, because it just goes under the rug, right?
Yeah, Stephen, you said earlier that listening is a core leadership skill. And that's dead on, right? This is a really, people will tell you essentially everything you need to know if you are willing to listen.
Yeah, one tip that my coach helped me with is to help people feel understood. Repeat the thing back to them in their own words. And if they say, yup, you got it, you're like, okay, I understand you. So those listening skills, teaching skills, like those are the basics for delegation. I think before you can start really delegating, you almost have to have that foundation. Let's talk a little bit about delegation. So the baseline, we've built a good base. We trust one another. We feel heard, understood mutually. You talked about in your talk adapting this like, if you are a founder, you have to become a teacher, and you have to embrace this teaching mentality. Say you have an amazing culture. Where do you see shop owners or business owners maybe struggling on the actual delegation part of things?
Mm-hmm. So this is the kind of classic conundrum of a novice to an expert. So if you're a business owner and at this point, if you're starting to ask yourself a question, how do I build a business that's not dependent on me? Then you've developed something that's working in some way, right? You've developed something that is causing the business to grow or to want to grow. And it means that something is working well. Now, you might think that you know exactly what it is that's causing it to work well, and you might be really attached to that. And you might also not know exactly what it is, but you are very hesitant to change anything from the way that you're doing this work. Okay. So now you're essentially become an expert in delivering to get the outcomes that you want, but you are not an expert in how to get other people to deliver those outcomes. And because you've spent the time figuring all this out, you've lost track of what it was like when you first started. So the expert novice problem is, I no longer know enough about what it's like to be you, the novice, to be able to help you make it to where I am as the expert. Like I often have to help people recognize that they're so much further ahead than the people they're trying to teach, because I get a lot of frustration with, I'm trying to teach them and they don't understand anything. They just can't do it, as you put it. And that's the thing that we kind of have to start with is like, okay, first, are we really clear what it is that actually has to be taught and where we have to start in order for people to learn that? Any teacher finds themselves with that kind of question, right? Imagine a kindergarten teacher who has kids coming from like all kinds of backgrounds, right? All different places. The first job is to assess, like, what do you know? Have you learned your letters? You know, these kinds of things. And as a business owner, that's some work that we often overlook. We often overlook do I really know where my people are starting? And can I empathize enough to help them build the mental constructs they need to be able to do this work effectively?
Because when we were starting ourselves, we were figuring it out as we go. We were making all the mistakes, building up our task maturity. And so to put yourself truly in their shoes and be like, okay, where was I 4 years ago when I knew nothing about this? And do I give them the empathy? We have a lot of young people that work at Campus Inc. And a lot of times they'll produce art. And I'll be like, that won't print right. Like that's not going to look good on a shirt. Like, nope, the colors are, that won't pop. It's going to be too thick, whatever. And something you put out there it was a cartoon, I believe. And it was, if you delegate tasks, you're always going to be part of the process. But if you delegate critical thinking, people will make good choices without you. Can you talk about those two different, and there's a cute cartoon that was with it as well. Can you talk the difference about delegation and delegating versus teaching critical thinking?
Yes. Yeah. So this is, we kind of call this our secret sauce when we're talking about delegation, when you actually get into it. Now that you're actually ready to delegate, what is it that you're actually delegating? And so with like 95% of the people that we talk to, we ask them what delegation is. And they're like, well, I tell Susie to do A, B, and C, and I tell John to do D, E, and F and whatever. And then it's sort of like, well, and then what happens after you've told them to do those things? And they're like, well, what happens next is they bring me back the finished product. And then I put it all right. So I'm always in this mix, right? And the first problem is we have to sort of break the idea that that's what delegation is. Delegation is not giving people tasks. That's just task assignment, as we call it. What delegation really is incrementally getting people to the place where they can think all the way through what it is, like why they're doing what they're doing, what it is they're trying to accomplish with what they're doing, and then whether what they're doing is going to accomplish those things that they are aiming for. If they can see the full picture, if they can see the kind of full arc of the activity, the outcome, the kind of delivery, they can make choices along the way when the unexpected arise, right? So if I can understand that my ultimate goal is to print this on a shirt in a way that's going to look amazing, then I can start to work backwards from that with, okay, what does it take to print this on a shirt? What would get in the way of this printing in the way that I want? Okay, how would I then backmap that into the artwork that I'm designing? And how might I take my first draft, which is like what I would love it to look like on paper, and move it into something that's ready for this new medium? Right. In order to do that as a leader, as a person who's like a teacher, you've really got to help people step back and kind of look at the big picture. But then also you've got to figure out where it breaks down, because almost inevitably people won't be like, oh, when you're like, think about how this is going to show up at the end of this process. Typically they're not like, oh, and they get it. Typically they say, well, wouldn't this be this, or wouldn't this work out this way? And you'll say, no, you don't know these other things about how the printing process works, right? And you realize, oh, actually, I have to teach you this element of the process in order for you to be able to see the whole thing, right? So all of this is to say, we typically get really frustrated in the teaching of the critical thinking process because we overlook some of the things that people need to understand and integrate in order to actually be able to think critically. They are almost literally blind to elements of what is obvious to us. And that makes it seem like they can't think critically or they can't accomplish the task that we're looking for them to do.
So what you're saying is if you're going to teach someone a new task, being able to show them the entire thing, almost start with the result and build back the activities that are going to get there. and know that they're going to struggle along the way. One of the things you had on one of your slides, and I've used this now to teach a lot of my team, is you had a warning sign that says, I do, with an arrow, and maybe Chris, we can pop it up. It says, I do, with an arrow to you do. And then on the second slide, it was, it should actually be a lot of we do's together. Can you talk about maybe some of the mistakes that business owners make trying to actually teach?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the other side of the coin, you have some people where you're like, man, this person does not want to work at all. And then you have some people who are like, just give me a job, like, let me do it. I really want to let me take responsibility for that. And you're like, okay, you do it. Right. That's our, as we say, like, I'd love to have you do this. I don't want this to be on my plate anymore. You do it. And then the first thing they ask you is, well, what should I do? How should I do it? Right. And as leaders, we're often like, you literally asked me to give this to you. And the first question is, how do you do it? Come on. Right. So we have this tendency to, when someone asks for responsibility or demonstrates their readiness for responsibility, to push everything directly to them. And we think we've done these kind of incremental steps because we've maybe painted a bit of a picture. Maybe we've painted a picture of what we want the outcome to look like. And what we want them to do is figure out how to get from where we are to the outcome that we're looking for. And we think we don't care about how they get there. What is really the case, though, is that they're not necessarily asking you to just give the whole thing to them and let them figure out and make the mistakes along the way. They're asking you to let them make little leaps that feel safe enough for them to take on along the way. And so when they come to you and they're like, well, how should I get started on this? What should I do to go in the right direction? It's almost like you gave someone a car and you said, drive to California, and they're in New York, and you said, drive to California, but they had no compass. Well, they could start driving, and right, but that's the equivalent of what they could start driving, or you could say, well, that way is west. So the first thing, okay, that way is west. The second thing, right? Here, this is the way that, this is the highway that I typically take. Here's how you might deviate from that highway, right? So you kind of think about a few things that help people not necessarily do it exactly your way, but get them directionally moving toward the target in a way that helps them start to pull together their own schema or their own idea for how something should work. And the we do's along the way do two things. One, they build the confidence of your employees to start doing some of that thinking themselves without feeling like they could crash the car in the ocean, in the wrong ocean, right? And two, they manage your risk. Right. So this is another reason why we are often hesitant to delegate, is that, as you said, when you first start, you're making tons of mistakes and you have huge tolerance for mistakes because you don't have any other choices. But once you start to like winnow your mistakes, your tolerance for mistakes starts to decline precipitously. And it makes it really hard for other people to learn with the freedom that you had. So you want to, this is a way of kind of managing the sort of risk associated with delegation.
And so can you talk about that that fear employees, I don't want to mess it up, right? Like I started, but I didn't want to mess it up. Can you talk about that culture of teaching and making mistakes that the owner needs to kind of embrace?
Yeah, I mean, I think, so we started off talking a little bit about this idea that some of what is in our way is our own mindset. And so why do employees fear messing it up? Because we told them that whether implicitly or explicitly, we told them that they will probably mess it up. Okay, so that maybe makes it a reasonable fear. And they haven't done it before, so that might also make it a reasonable fear. On top of that, we might have a really tight sense of what we want success to look like. And we might inadvertently be giving feedback along the way that's sort of like, that's not how I would do it. That's not how I would do it. Right. So we need to be thoughtful about our own mindset and how we're showing up and the messages that we're implicitly and explicitly sharing is as sort of a first step. But secondly, and I think this is a step that a lot of leaders miss, we need to say to people, I am intentionally making space for you to figure this out, which might mean that you're not going to get it right away. Part of the fear that they have sometimes is that people don't like to redo work. Like I don't. And so doing it wrong and then discovering that I have to fix it is really frustrating. And so people like to avoid that if they can. But establishing the expectation of not quite getting it right helps people understand that what you're trying to accomplish is actually not the getting right. What you're trying to accomplish is the learning. And that's becoming the teacher is what I want is not a perfect outcome right away. What I want is enough learning to be able to do this by yourself in the long term.
And I think like employees are scared, right? I don't want to mess it up because I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to mess it up so I don't have to redo it. I don't want to mess it up because I know the owner does it really, really well and I'm not going to be doing it. I think it's Simon Sinek that says choose falling over failure. And I think the analogy is like if you're teaching a kid to ride a bike, right? Like they are going to fall. That's not failing. It's just a repeated amount of falls until you start to actually pedal and take the training wheels off and all those good things. And so being able to show your employees, hey, like this you will fall a bunch, totally fine. And not reprimanding them for it. And because I think it's almost like maybe from our childhood, a little of am I going to get in trouble if I do this wrong? And that's scary. And you don't know how your employees were raised. You don't know how they were taught. And so you have to be like very, very conscious of that. I don't want to say like this is like childhood trauma stuff, but the way I was raised by my dad, who was a business owner versus someone who wasn't, is completely different. And I take directions much differently. Sarah, you talked a little bit, this is on your LinkedIn, and you said, I'm playing the infinite game in your bio. Can you talk a little bit about this? Because I think it's really, really interesting and maybe some analogies to business owners as well.
Yeah. I'm glad you called that out. I was hoping it would be sufficiently intriguing. So this is a reference to the book Finite and Infinite Games by James Carse that I think a lot of people have come across. And I have sort of adopted it and like to say that that's what I'm doing because I think that it's I don't know if it was like intentional or unintentional, but it sort of unlocks one of these sort of biggest problems with the way that achievers think, which is like happiness is always around just after the next achievement, right? So the premise in this book is that there are essentially two types of games. There's finite games, which you play to win, and then there's infinite games, which you play in order to keep playing, right? And the author, James Carse, goes on to say that this applies in so many different ways. And it's essentially these kind of two alternative mindsets to the way that you approach essentially anything. Are you playing for the outcome? Are you playing to end? Do you have an end game in mind that you're going after? And do you then have expectations assigned to what will happen after you've finished or achieved? Versus an infinite game where you're playing in order to position yourself for the next play. And playing in order to position yourself for the next play, it creates such expansive ideas about what happens next, right? It's not about I've achieved this outcome and then I'll be happy, or I've achieved this outcome and then I'll be able to do this other thing. I've gotten my degree, I've gotten my black belt, I've gotten my whatever. Now I'll be satisfied. But instead, I've engaged in this work. I've run this company for the last 10 years. It's not that I've now achieved something. It's that now I've learned all of this stuff. Now I have the capacity to go on and apply it in some other way. I have this opportunity to share it with others. I have this chance to pivot if I want. It's all about thinking not just in terms of what I'm accomplishing from a day-to-day perspective or from what I've done with my business perspective, but how am I growing and evolving through every kind of next act or action that I take on. And I love that mindset. I especially love it for kind of people like me who sometimes have fallen into the trap of thinking, well, I need to do that or finish that or accomplish that, and to instead really be thinking about how is this leading on to the next exciting part of the journey.
I love that. There's and I'm bringing up Simon Sinek again. He does give like a really cool 30-minute talk on finite and infinite games in business. And he'll talk through like different businesses that are playing the infinite game versus the finite game. And I think, for shop owners listening to this, like owning a business doesn't have defined rules, start dates, end dates, like there is no clear cut winner or loser, right? But I think as we become more mature in business, we think, is this business fulfilling me? Is it making me happy? Do I feel enriched by it? And a lot of times we get stuck in the weeds and we don't come up for air and say like, am I doing, am I doing what I actually love? Or am I just like trying to chase the next dollar? Right. Can you talk about maybe the difference between making a lot of money and being profitable versus being fulfilled and running something that you love?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, but Warren Bennis once wrote that the act of becoming a great leader is basically synonymous with becoming an integrated human being. And the great opportunity I think that running a business offers us is that it's constantly putting us in new, challenging circumstances that give us an opportunity to learn something about ourselves. And we have two choices. One is to keep head down, go after the next thing, make sure I'm checking off my administrative tasks, make sure I'm, selling, make sure I'm X, Y, and Z, make sure I'm paying attention to my P&L. And those things are all important. But if we do that at the expense of learning from the situations we find ourselves in and from taking advantages of the challenges that they present us, we're really losing out on what can ultimately be an incredibly exciting journey, even if ultimately you decide, I'm X number of years in, and actually this is not the thing that I want to spend the rest of my life doing. If you are tapping into the ways that doing this work can help you grow as a person, as a leader, into your sort of your best self, into your most self-actualized self, you can. That's a way, I think, to tap into a well of energy and engagement that a lot of leaders can lose out on, especially when they go through periods of having to make choices like spend a lot of time on work and less time on family, or a lot of time on travel and less time being present with people that they care about. Those things will happen from time to time, and you'll have periods where you've got to lean in and do that kind of work. A part of what will energize you is taking taking on the challenge of, okay, I've gone through this period. How am I going to figure out how to back up and make sure that I am rebalancing and spending the time in the places that I want? I've got a new challenge because I've got, I've lost a big customer. How's that going to demonstrate who I am and how I show up with my team, what choices that I make, et cetera. So in my mind, the incredible opportunity that comes with being the leader of a business is the opportunity to kind of learn not just about what's going on in business and what's going on in all the sort of domains that you have to operate in, but to learn about what's going on with you. And the more you can do that, I think the more opportunity you have for fulfillment in the long term.
We often say that like owning a company is super lonely, isolating. You don't have a lot of coworkers. You're figuring it out as you go. You work with a lot of founders. How early should a business owner really start to, have a coach or be part of, like, do you see most trying to strong arm it and do it themselves? Like, what do you see with small business owners?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I think sometimes coaching can seem like it's really expensive or inaccessible. There are lots of different opportunities. I think chances to be a part of masterminds, even with young entrepreneurs, not having to wait until you're like enough revenue to be part of YPO or what have you, or hire a private coach. These can be really, really accessible. And you can find folks that are much more affordable. And I strongly recommend, particularly if you're sort of on your first entrepreneurial journey, or you're really early on in your career and you're doing this, to start very early. Find someone who is experienced, who can kind of serve as a mentor, at least can start helping you kind of hold a mirror up to yourself. I've talked with a lot of folks who find that the earlier on you are in your journey, just having someone who's like willing to hold you accountable even to your own thoughts and awareness can be so invaluable. Sometimes people are really lucky; those people kind of exist in their lives and they're able to tap into them. But I strongly recommend finding someone that you can connect with at least on a monthly basis, who's going to kind of help you hold yourself accountable to the things that are important to be doing, whether it's self-care or it's that part of the business that you don't love and you just don't spend enough time on, or whatever that might be. And if nothing else, finding a peer group of people, even if it's 2 or 3, but ideally 5 to 7 other people who are similarly situated and looking to achieve some of the same things.
Yeah, and for those listening, Kevin was that for me at Campus Inc. Kevin Baumgart, and then started a small group, met with them regularly, joined a couple communities. We're starting one for our industry called Fabric, so check it out. But those groups are so powerful, and it's like your advisory board. They lift you up. You can bring them all your problems. So love that. Love that. That's something you harp on. Favorite books, okay, like favorite books, podcasts. What do you consume? What would be a couple recommendations if people want to learn?
Yeah, so I've got a book for everything. I'm a voracious reader, so some people feel kind of overwhelmed with my reading choices, but I have a few that I find that I'm recommending over and over again. Excuse me. One that's actually, I think, really, really powerful, and I think has pushed a lot of people to think differently about organizational structure and how to position yourself as a leader to not be essential to the business's success, is actually called No Rules Rules and the Netflix Revolution, which is co-authored by Reed Hastings and an organizational psychologist. It kind of digs into how Netflix constructed its culture to create essentially an inverted org chart, where the people on the front lines make the vast majority of the choices, and the people who who are kind of upstream in the organizational structure are really responsible for context, not decision making. It's not going to be something necessarily that people take and just implement, but I think it pushes the framework and the thinking about how you want your culture to work in really healthy ways. Especially given the advice that it offers on things like how to deliver and receive feedback. The 4A framework that it offers is super powerful, for example. The second thing, for those who are trying to figure out, even with a small team, how to create a rock solid culture, we recommend Legacy. A fantastic book that's actually about the New Zealand All Blacks. So it's really fun to read, but it has, I think, really great examples, not just of kind of the core principles that the All Blacks adopted, but the process they went through to create that together and create something that's really, really meaningful, and obviously has created, not to overuse the term, a strong legacy for the New Zealand All Blacks and that team. And there are a number of other ones that often I recommend, kind of depending on the where folks are in their businesses. I absolutely love Michael Steiner's book, The Coaching Habit, which I think is a fantastic. I think I have to read it to myself every now and again. It's a fantastic book about learning to stop talking. Which is sort of ironic for me to say, I suppose, in the end of a podcast where I've spoken much too much. But it's about stepping back and listening better to your team members in a way that actually helps make you into a better coach and teacher for them. So those are a few books that I love and find myself recommending all the time. I use them over and over again. And I think it sounds like you enjoy the work by Simon Sinek. I'm always coming across pieces that he's published that I love. And I love Adam Grant's podcast as well. Certainly there are others that I tap into, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that Mark Devine, who's the founder of SealFit, has a podcast with some really incredible stuff that's specifically focused on developing yourself as a holistic leader. That if that's something you're interested in, I highly recommend it.
Adam Grant writes like Think Again, Learning How to Be Wrong, Hidden Potential, awesome stuff to consume. So thank you so much.
His Work Life, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Sarah, welcome to our industry. We're all a little crazy, but thank you so much for today, for coming to Print Hustlers. I think this is one of my favorite talks we've had in a minute. So thank you so much. If folks want to get in touch with you, follow you, what's the easiest way to do that?
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best. That's kind of our most active space. Sarah K. Silverman on LinkedIn. And our website is outsideangle.com. I didn't spend a bunch of time talking about our work at Outside Angle, but essentially everything we discussed today is sort of the core work that we do with leaders and with teams, sometimes just helping folks kind of make sense of where they are, but often helping people through transitions like scaling, getting something started in the first place, scaling up, scaling down, pivoting, and just generally building the capacity to navigate change effectively. Stephen, thank you so much for the opportunity to chat today.
Yeah. All right, Print Hustlers. This is another episode of Print Hustlers podcast, and we'll see you all next week.
thanks so much for listening. Hopefully that was informative. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to like. Don't forget to hit the bell for notifications if you enjoyed this video. If you enjoy all the stuff we're putting out, it's really helpful. We love to just be able to see it. That means that we're doing a good job. To subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and hit the like button. And I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.